The Spill Sports Show. Matt Reynoldson.
I've always been told I have the face for radio, and now I'm making it happen.
David Eickholt.
It's utter blasphemy. It blows my mind.
Scott Ayers.
The next time they make the playoffs, I'll be running for president.
Spend your Thursday drive time with the Spill Sports Show. Every week from 3 to 5 on KRNU.
Yeah.
Did that, put him in the aisle. Johnny the Jet Rogers just tore them loose from their shoes.
You believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
Comes to LeBron, he takes a fadeaway for the win. Hey! Knocked it down!
There goes Davis. Oh my God! Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
You can't believe what just happened. What a time to be alive.
Hit me with the horn, 20. Yeah! Here we go now! 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 Check it out!
Hey, welcome in to the Spill Sports Show live and worldwide on KRNU2. Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, Scott Ayers, pleased to be with you on the air for one last time. Boys,
hurrah.
After 3
Spirit lives forever.
years of the Spill Sports Show, our very last show, and we are here to reminisce with you all on some of the best times in this show, and one show that really broke a lot of ground in KRNU2 history, David.
Yeah, it really is. You know, I give all the credit in the world to Jordan Stevenson for being the reason that we actually achieved the level that we did. And, hashtag blessed. I was proud to be a part of it. It's been a heck of a ride, to say the least. I know Matt and I talked about it 3 years ago, and I'm like, hey, I know this guy who knew this guy who knew this guy, and it was Scott Ayers. So it's been it's been a thrill to have Scott here. It's been good to really just ride this whole thing out. It's been a great learning experience, but I am sad about this semester that our schedules weren't the best in the world.
Certainly
but
not.
happy that we get one last hurrah.
Yeah, one last hurrah. It's kind of weird. Kind of went by fast. I miss Jordan Stevenson a lot.
Yeah.
He brought in really great content or really bad content. I don't know if we ever.
All great content.
All great content.
All great content.
All
You know that
content.
Drake song "God's Plan"? It's Jordan's plan, actually.
Jordan's playing, dang it. And
He was
so-
actually one of the first to tweet hashtag God's plan.
Well, then that's
Stevenson, a
I know the
trailblazer.
crazy part is I think you're actually right.
Yep. Jordan Stevenson, we'll be throwing you one of his tweets later in the show as a little bit of a throwback. But this whole show is a bit of a throwback, and kind of what we led off pretty much every show with is something regarding Nebraska football. And there's been a lot of great takes about Nebraska football, and I want to just get us started off hot. One of my favorite rants in this show's history was David's about Bob Diaco. Take a listen.
What makes a good leader?
Love
Somebody
and
that is-
diligence.
Right.
It's a Bob Diaco quote.
It's somebody that no matter how good or bad things are, if things are good, you spread the credit around and don't brag about it. But when things go wrong, you take accountability. Who is the one person Bob Diaco is not blamed for any on the defense? Himself. He has blamed the former defensive coordinator. He's blamed the former AD, and he didn't even know Mark Banker. He has blamed the players. He has said all these other things, but where is I'm game planning? He gives up 54 points to Minnesota, and here's what he says: I may continue coaching these players with love and diligence. Forget the continuing coaching. How about you start coaching? You can't even make the 119th ranked offense in Division I. You can't stop them back-to-back times. And there's no reason. There is no, I'm sorry I'm saying this. There's no reasonable reason for him not to be taking accountability for himself. He needs to take accountability. He needs to have a better game plan. He needs to do what he needs to do and fix something. Just show some heart in these next 2 games. Everyone knows he's not coming back. Everybody knows. Right now, if he wants to get hired somewhere decent after this, he needs to treat these next 2 games like an audition. Say, hey, look, we sucked this many games this season, but I could turn it around. I helped turn it around against a guy like Saquon Barkley. And if you can do that, maybe you'll get hired in a non-Power 5 assistant coaching role, because right now, I don't even know if you should be coaching Power 5 football at all.
Wow, David coming out hot, and Bob Diaco was one of our favorite subjects on this show. We had a lot of fun at probably the expense of him at the beginning of this year, but the beginning of year three.
Okay, first of all, he brought it on himself.
Yeah, he definitely brought it on himself.
He brought it on himself.
But, guys, year 3 might have been my favorite year on this show, despite us not really doing it that much second semester. But year 3 might have been my favorite year on this show simply because of the train wreck that was Nebraska football. It gave us something new to talk about each week.
You know, it really was. It was a really fun experience. I also feel like it was so much less cringe. I listen back to some of our first shows. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, how do we have anyone listen to us? It's just hot take after hot take after hot take. But it really was. It was a fun ride. No 2 weeks were alike, simply because of the madness that is, Nebraska football. This past year, and maybe you'll have some sort of consistency for the next couple of years with Frost and company. But it really was. It was a lot of fun this year. We don't mean to degrade others except Bob Diaco. He deserved every bit of ridicule he got.
Yeah, Bob Diaco kind of sent us on a crazy ride. It was from the very beginning. I remember our show the week after his whole saga when it came to the Arkansas State game and not going out to the media and addressing the media after that kind of shoddy defensive performance against a lower-level Arkansas State team.
Fourth and goal?
Yeah, it turned out to be kind of a misunderstanding, but it really set the stage for what we were going to see with Bob Diaco. Here's what he said on that Tuesday.
Today. Good thing to do. So the only thing reactionary about this moment now is the fact that I'm going today rather than tomorrow as a defensive flip. Coach thought it would be a good idea for me to just immediately address the group after being attacked this morning the way that I was. So communicating for a long period of time about the fall, the season, media, and noodling it, not just communicating and noodling. I was under the impression that I didn't have to do post-game media.
Noodling it, and Bob Diaco certainly noodled a lot of things. Scott, that was a weird week.
I mean, the whole season was weird, and when you have a defensive coordinator after week 1 using the phrase noodling it, I don't know how we overlooked that and thought that the season would be okay, because man, it was weird. Everything about Diaco was weird, and good riddance to the guy.
Yeah, he certainly had some demons, it seemed, because he was just such an interesting guy and gave us storylines week after week after week. But let's go back over that Nebraska football season and reminisce on one of the weirdest strings of games in maybe Nebraska football history, but certainly our history here as media people, as radio people, and as simple observers of Nebraska football. They win that first game against Arkansas State. A high-scoring game.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, 40. I think it was
41-33 because they had a shot to get a touchdown, but they would have needed a two-point conversion to go into overtime.
Yeah, it was a crazy game against Arkansas State, and a wild defensive performance, lackluster, especially in that first half. And it seemed like the defense, or the 3-4 defense, or really whatever Bob Diaco was running, was a little bit different than what many of us were expecting. Then the second week, you go out in the first half and allow 42 points at Oregon, and that's really when the wheels started to come off. Nebraska made a valiant comeback in that second half. Well, that was wild.
That was an interesting week because everyone at halftime was so ticked off. Twitter was probably the most toxic I've ever seen it when it comes to Nebraska football. But then after the game, everyone was so confident going forward because they shut them out in the second half. And I'm sitting over here screaming by myself. It's because they stopped throwing the football. They stopped doing what was working for them, and Nebraska was able to contain Royce Freeman in that game. So I don't know. That was just a weird game. But to answer your question about 3-4 defense, I believe Bob Diaco renamed it to the Swiss cheese defense.
The Diaco defense, something surrounding a lot of holes in it, because there was. And now he's a defensive analyst at Oklahoma. But that was a weird first half.
Analyst,
yeah.
Yeah.
But
air quotes.
Again, a very weird defensive performance in the first half at Oregon. They shut them out in the second half. And then it brings us to the next game. Nebraska, rebound time, only a 3-game non-conference schedule. So you come back home against Northern Illinois. Half the team has the flu. And the defense is on a pretty good roll after that second half. Tanner Lee throws 2 touchdowns for the other team. Nebraska loses at home to Northern Illinois by a score of 21-17.
Yeah, and I had the privilege of announcing that football game. It was a very gray morning, and I remember on that first drive, Tanner Lee and the boys are moving down the field, and then
I believe it was
Stanley Morgan missed the block, didn't he?
Yeah, it was Stanley Morgan missed the block. It was a screen pass 90 yards going the other way.
It was a potential All-American corner right, for Northern Illinois.
Yeah,
good player.
And
knifed it, knifed the screen pass.
Nothing got going, and, I know Nebraska's defense held them to – and it's funny, you kind of see the waves of this Husker defense. They had some performances where they allowed it, Arkansas State allowed 35 to Oregon, 17 or 21 to Northern Illinois, and only 7 of those was on the defense. But I'm sure we'll talk about it soon. But that second half of the season, the defense was horrendous.
They stopped, and I got a couple connections on the team. Like nobody liked playing for Diaco. Nobody respected him. And that obviously showed on the field. It wasn't just the scheme. It's the fact that he didn't have the leadership qualities. He didn't have the attention of the locker room. And Diaco obviously wanted a lot more power than Riley and company were willing to give him. And they shouldn't have given him any more power, because if you want that power, he had a shot. He could have gone to a much lower Division I school and probably been a head coach again. If you leave UConn, you're in a decent conference, so you get fired. Someone will still hire you. So, if you want that much power, you could have gone. But just nobody respected the guy. Nobody thought the defense would work. And I don't even think Diaco knew what he was doing when it came to the end of the season.
But there was one guy that really trusted Diaco to points end, and that was Sean Eichhorst. And the following week, after starting 1-2 on the season, Nebraska made the move to fire Eichhorst.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us here this afternoon at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I want to share some information about the decision we have made to drive Nebraska athletics to a higher level of competitiveness on the field. Husker fans, as we know the best fans in the nation, deserve winning teams. And while we've made much progress across many dimensions of Husker athletics, we expect more. Winning can and often does happen in concert with well-run, quality college programs that work to ensure the success of our students. That's our expectation here at Nebraska. We take pride here in doing things right and in doing the right thing, and that won't change in the future. This is not an either-or option. We can and should win in that kind of environment. I know that you've seen the news that we've opened a search for a new leader of Husker athletics.
So that's Ronnie Green, the chancellor of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, on the firing of athletic director Sean Eichhorst. Eichhorst had been at Nebraska since 2013, and things clearly weren't working out between the baffling misjudgment of the rivalry series toward the end of the season, where Nebraska forfeited playing Iowa at the end of the season, forfeited the Black Friday games, and on the flip side of Friday football games, did not push back against Friday night football games being at Memorial Stadium in Lincoln or on the road, which is terrible for the Lincoln economy and really puts a lot of people at a bit of an impasse. So many people were very frustrated with Sean Eichhorst, and that was kind of the boiling point. I had been told by multiple sources that the ball was rolling to fire Eichhorst even before the Northern Illinois loss, but Eichhorst, David, you talked to him out in the hallway.
Yeah. I was
that
just
Northern
about to bring
Illinois
that
game.
up too.
Yeah, and he actually went down and addressed the media after the Northern Illinois game.
Nobody knew he was going to go down there. He spontaneously went down there, and I remember Sean Callahan at Husker Online, everyone in the media room was like, what's going on? Because that was just so unprecedented for an AD to come down after a game, especially without telling Ronnie Green and the chancellor. He just did it. And it was just a really weird, awkward conversation. And I think Eichhorst, at that point, looking back, I think he had a feeling that was coming. So I think he did that to try and attempt to save his job. That's at least the read I got out of it.
Yeah, I think we can all agree to this move to get rid of Eickholt was probably the best move the Huskers did. And I think there was speculation, what an odd time in the middle of a football season, but it came to a point where the madness had to stop, and it starts at the top with Sean Eickholt. And so that allowed the search to begin, even though it was during the middle of the season. I think it probably gave the Huskers more time to do it then rather than wait until the end of the season, possibly had their guy Bill Moose. He could have been somewhere else. So it was nice to see the Huskers to act quickly, and I also really appreciate them also keeping Mike Riley's job until the end of the year. I think it was fair enough to let him ride out the rest of the season because I think people started to realize that this team had maybe not as much talent as there was speculation going into the season.
Well, there were a lot of questions on that during the season, and especially at the end of September, because Eickholt got fired just 2 days before the Rutgers game. We were actually on the air that day and discussed the firing of Sean Eickholt.
That was, 2 hours before the show, I believe, because we covered that press conference.
Covered the press
before.
conference, came straight here and spit our hot fire takes
always,
as we always did.
Always.
But then Nebraska turned around and played Rutgers. Played a really pretty rocky game. A lot of guys coming off of illness, but ended up grinding out that win against an okay Rutgers team. Not the best. I don't think Nebraska
rebuilding, or actually not rebuilding. It's called building because they don't have a program.
Yeah, I mean, it's
ever.
not a terrible team this year, as terrible as perhaps they want.
They got a couple good recruits coming in too.
Exactly. So at that point, Nebraska is heading into the end of September, into that first Friday night game, and sitting at 2-2, and an underdog against Illinois. It was the strangest sight you'll ever see, and Nebraska goes and blows out the Illini. Kind of a feel-good win. You're at 3-2, and then is when the wheels start to come off. Nebraska sitting at 3-2, the defense playing at its peak that it did all year, allowing one defensive touchdown in something like a span of 14 quarters or something. And Diaco was riding high. Nebraska was frustrated still about the Northern Illinois loss and the Oregon loss, but seemed to move past it, and we're 2-0 in the conference.
There was a lot of uneasy tension, I feel like, at that time. Because remember, Sean was very adamant on Twitter that what do you guys want from the defense right now over the last 2 or 3 weeks, I think it was. He was in the top 25 in defense, top 20 in defense allowed. They played who they put on the schedule, but anyone who looked at the eye test knew that defense just was not there. And I get that Sean and other media people just couldn't flat out say it, but I think most Husker fans knew, I'm like, that defense is in trouble. And I just think the longer the season went on, the more guys got hurt, the more, I'd say disrespect that Diaco earned in the locker room. Like, nobody respected him. I think all that came into fruition, especially in the second half of the season. And then right when the Minnesota game came, if everything fell off, that was it. Because Minnesota was 119th ranked in offense at that time. They put 54 points.
Yeah, and it's funny because going into the Wisconsin game, there was some optimism coming back to life. I think people there was some talk around the town saying, you know what, we might
that
have
was a fun atmosphere.
It was a great atmosphere,
that
and for 3 quarters, Nebraska was in that game. I think Wisconsin just tired out the Huskers, and then Ohio State happened, and I remember sitting in the press box looking down and saying, okay, yeah, these guys are just, everything's cool that they're doing. They were yelling at each other before the game. They were making noises, and I said, oh, no. And that's how the game went. It was, oh, no.
And that game actually was significant to Nebraska football, to the history of Nebraska football, for multiple reasons, which we'll tell you on the other side of the break. Stay tuned for kind of a rehashing of some of our old promos, which we'll be leading in from every break with. But segment 1 done, segment 2 on the way here in the final show ever of the Spill Sports Show. Stay with us.
Whether college graduation is in a few months or in a few years, gaining hands-on experience in your field of interest is a must. While a college degree is a fruitful step towards acquiring a top-tier career, today's employers are looking for college grads that already have some experience under their belt. Here at Husker HireLink, we're here to ensure that you're the person they're looking for. By simply uploading your current resume and skills, we can connect you with hundreds of employers seeking to hire college students to fill their intern, part-time, and full-time positions. Log on to HuskerHireLink.com today to get started.
Air, fundamental to all living things, and it's all thanks to trees. Not only do trees supply oxygen, they also provide homes to wildlife, filter water, and let's not forget their natural beauty. But the trees need your help. The Nebraska Arbor Day Foundation is doing their part to revitalize forests across the country, and you can help. Donate to the Nebraska Arbor Day Foundation today by visiting www.arborday.org. Be that breath of fresh air and ensure forests live on for future generations.
What are you still doing with all those old t-shirts that don't even fit anymore? Why not get rid of them by donating them to Goodwill of Lincoln? Goodwill of Lincoln is a not-for-profit organization that takes nearly any household item and item of clothing. Its main mission is willing workers employed and community resources maximized. Goodwill also provides a safe environment for people with mental, physical, and emotional disabilities to be employed. So what are you still doing with those t-shirts? Your freshman 15 is less noticeable in a slightly bigger shirt anyway. Donate the small ones to Goodwill of Lincoln. To contact Goodwill of Lincoln, go to lincolngoodwill.org.
Let's go. Let's get it cranked up.
Back to hard-hitting sports talk with the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2. Don't forget to check out our podcast at thespillkrnu.wordpress.com in the hours following the show.
That's like re-releasing a Tupac album and giving him a Grammy.
Now, live from Andersen Hall at the University of Nebraska, here's Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers.
Back here on the Spill Sports Show, final show edition of our 3 years, talking a little bit of Nebraska football and kind of reminiscing on this past crazy season. Nebraska started off 2-2 on the season with September wins over Rutgers and Arkansas State, September losses to Oregon and Northern Illinois, ended up going to beat Illinois on the road in a Friday night matchup in Champaign, Illinois, and then was kind of when the wheels fell off. The second half against Wisconsin, Nebraska was dominated and ended up losing by 21. And then the following week against Ohio State, might have been the weather, might have been fall break, might have been a general sense of apathy for a 3-3 team, but Nebraska went into that game with no shot to win. One hotel manager here in Lincoln told me that they were about 50 to 60% full on that Ohio State weekend, which is unheard of for a top 5 team coming into town.
Yeah, you could just tell, especially the vibe around Lincoln. I mean, it was just kind of like, it's your team, you're gonna live and die till the end. But I mean, it was as dead as the Dead Sea. I mean, that atmosphere, people were cleared out, and it wasn't even halftime, and there was bunches and bunches of people just leaving the stands. And I remember, Matt, you and I were on the field, and we just kind of looked around, and we were just stunned. It was
surreal.
It was unbelievable how few people there were, especially for Nebraska. I mean, that's just unheard of. But you know, that's what happens when everyone can just tell. When you can tell the players don't even want to be on the field, that's how you know change has to be made. And I think the Northern Illinois game was when I started being really skeptical of that, and you two weren't ready to get on that. And I think after the Ohio State game, everyone started being like, okay, they don't even look like they want to be out there. Not just because they were getting beat. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not about that. They didn't like the scheme. They didn't respect the coaching. I think they respected Mike Riley, but that's a whole different subject.
There's a difference between respecting coaching and respecting someone as a person.
Yeah, and I think everyone will agree that Mike Riley was a heck of a person. The Nebraska job was too big for Mike Riley, and I think everyone knew right when he got hired, he just wouldn't have the kind of success that Nebraska craves. And hot take alert, I know, last show, but I got to do it anyway.
Sizzle.
If Scott Frost can't get Nebraska back to where it wants to be, nobody can.
Yeah, it might not happen.
This is the most crucial time in Nebraska athletics history in terms of football specifically. But I'm throwing athletics in there as a whole just because football is what everyone in this state cares about.
It is, because it's the longest leash anybody will ever have for Nebraska football for the rest of time, honestly. People are down, people are hurting about Nebraska football, and they truly believe Scott Frost is the one to get it back. But like you said, David, that was sort of a surreal feeling at the end of that Ohio State game. The stands were not full. An athletic department official told me during halftime that he overheard guys during the week saying, we have no chance to win this game. And that's kind of a culture that most fans would deem unacceptable for Nebraska football. And then from there, the wheels fell off. Nebraska won one game the entire rest of the season, and it was at Purdue on a really interesting game. Nebraska got run over by the Purdue running backs, but in a low-scoring game, it was Tanner Lee who came through at the end of that one, throwing for 409 yards in the game and the game-winning touchdown. Just when you felt Nebraska was okay, maybe getting toward bowl eligibility, maybe trickling toward they were 4-4 at that point, maybe trickling toward bowl eligibility. That was when the wheels fell off against Northwestern, and then against Minnesota, at Penn State, Iowa. Nebraska lost 4 games the rest of the way to finish 4-8 and welcome in the Frostman.
Yeah, and here's my thing, and this is to go back to Bob Diaco and that whole thing. Okay, I started getting very skeptical of Diaco after I think it was Oregon, because Bob Diaco is one of the best linebackers in his school's history. Okay, he has not been back there since he graduated in 1998, and this school particularly has a very, very, very good bond with their football alum. They always go back. They always, pay it forward, everything like that. They have very good communication with them. Bob Diaco's never even been back to Iowa. So I at that point, I just started realizing that this guy leaves a bad trail wherever he goes. Notre Dame fans don't miss him. UConn especially doesn't miss him. Iowa fans don't talk about him. And now Nebraska fans, he's the laughingstock of it.
Yeah, he's a punchline.
So, I mean, it was just there's really no way. I mean, we sit up here and we're supposed to articulate things. We're supposed to make sense of what's unclear and everything like that. That's what our job is as radio hosts, sports radio hosts, right? There's no way to make sense of what happened last year besides an absolute train wreck. There's just no explanation for some of the stuff that went on. I think it was the weirdest year in Nebraska football history. Just there's very little sense that came out of it.
Well, we were trying to make sense of it on this show, and what do we usually use to make sense of things, Scotty?
Hot takes and radio clips.
Hot takes and radio clips. Here's one of the latter.
Will the real
Diaco defense.
please stand up? I repeat, will the real
Diaco defense.
please stand up? We're gonna have a problem here.
So that was our bump into the show right after the Oregon game, because you didn't really know what you were going to get with Bob Diaco. That defense was really a mixed bag through 2 games, and we didn't realize that later in the season we would come to see such results as Iowa and Minnesota.
Pandora's box, man.
The
you
Pandora's
just don't know what you're
box. That's what he was.
But by the end of the year, it was less of a Pandora's box, and it's like, all right, what kind of animal poo do we have?
No, what it reminds me of is like when you're a kid and you're going to elementary school and it's like mystery meat and they just like take the scoop and they just dump it all over your tray. That's exactly what it felt like watching Diaco's defense every week.
Did somebody say mystery meat? David, you've long held a conspiracy on why the defense was so bad under Bob Diaco. Is that correct?
I was trying to remember my very articulate, very well thought out conspiracy theory. I'm missing my my chalkboard and all my newspaper clippings and lines going everywhere. I'm missing that right now.
But that's all right. That's all right, because you definitely had your own conspiracy theories about what Bob Diaco was, what he was sent here to do, and as an Iowa guy yourself, you didn't subscribe to the theory that he was sent here as a sleeper cell by Iowa.
Yeah,
that's right. That was Scott's theory, actually.
Well, sleeper agent for Iowa. Yeah.
To destroy the Nebraska football program. He did it effectively.
He did a really great
Diaco's
job,
destruction.
Diaco's destruction. Well, I mean, it may not have destroyed Nebraska entirely, because it turned the Huskers to maybe their native son, their homegrown savior. And we celebrated that a little bit here on this show.
Thumpity thump thump thumpity thump. Look at Frosty go. Thumpity thump thump thumpity thump. Over the hills of snow.
We had a lot of fun with drops on this show. Had a lot of fun with drops on this show, and
I'm in tears.
Perhaps nothing better than when David and Scott sang on the air.
Yep.
We'll show you that in the second hour. That was something
That was
certainly special.
arguably the greatest moment
Oh,
in this show's
absolutely.
history.
It was
That
too good.
I don't even remember. I think I was hyped up on Dr. Pepper or something, and I was just like shaking, so I had to let off some energy or something like that.
We were really into this Jimmy Buffett song. Again, we're playing that for you in the second hour. And then you guys might just sing along afterwards. But guys, it's a new era of Nebraska football, and we've gone through 2 interesting seasons, and 2 falls ago, we actually went through a very interesting time when Nebraska was a top 10 team and undefeated. It was a little bit of fool's gold for sure, but Nebraska was up there in the top 10, undefeated, beat everybody on their schedule.
Nearly beat Wisconsin.
And then you go to Wisconsin, they probably should have won that game, and maybe if they do, Mike Riley might still have his job.
You know, that's the whole thing. Is Mike Riley made a career, I feel like, at Oregon State with throwing in upsets winning some big games. I mean, when he was here.
When he was here, Michigan State was the only really thing to hang your hat on.
Yeah.
You know? That top 10 team came into Lincoln,
Brandon
lost,
Riley.
and then ended up making the college football playoff. But Mike Riley pulled off one of those, almost pulled off a second one on the road, very, very close against Wisconsin. I mean, 1 inch goes another way, and then you're looking at a top 5 Nebraska team maybe going into that Ohio State game.
It's just a weird, like I said, Mike Riley's tenure here is just weird.
Yeah,
it really
absolutely.
was. No consistency whatsoever. You just didn't know what you were going to get week after week. But it goes back to I still think the biggest downfall for Riley. First of all, I don't think the Diaco thing was his. I'm not blaming Diaco on Riley at all. I don't believe it was his decision. There was a higher up authority
decision. Yep.
And I think that alone is a big problem. If you don't let your coach pick his own offensive and defensive coordinator, you're probably not going to succeed. Okay. Right. And another thing is, Riley that staff just did not know how to develop. And, you know, I give Danny Langsdorff a lot of credit. Really, really nice guy. Was always great to the media despite maybe some very shaky performances. But there's a reason why Diaco and Langsdorff are analysts now and not even position coaches. And that just shows the lack of developmental skills I feel Nebraska's had. And the way to get Nebraska back up to where it wants to be is to go back to what it did best. Develop. Because they can get talent. They can get the 4 stars.
Yeah.
But there's just been such a lack of development.
And, guys, I feel like the big thing in this was just how Mark Banker got fired. Over the phone, Riley's on a flight. Actually, Banker's out recruiting. Riley calls him like as he's stopping at an airport or something like that.
I think he was in Omaha's airport, and then he just went home.
Yeah, it was disturbing how he was fired. They just did it the wrong way, and I'd almost think that karma's coming into play there.
Yeah, it's funny how it all came, and we talked on the show too, and not this last fall, but 2 falls ago about how many years will this Riley staff get, and there was debate whether 3 was fair or if they deserved a 4th, but I think after year 3, it came to a point where if this coaching staff has another year, the program can really take a massive slide, and they did lose some recruits along the way because that's what happens when you fire a coaching staff. Some guys leave, but it was ultimately the best decision to make for Riley and his staff, or Nebraska to part ways with Riley and his staff.
My golden rule, and I've often repeated on this show, is 3 years you have to show improvement. You have to show change. You don't have to get to where you want to go, but you have to show some sort of steady climb and some sort of encouragement. And last season was arguably the most depressing season in Nebraska football, maybe ever? Honestly, maybe. I would guess it's up there. And I don't know if you guys remember. Do you guys remember what happened with Mark Banker the day he got fired? It was maybe the day or 2 after he got fired, and it hadn't been reported yet. I ran into him outside the Union as he was walking the other way, and I'm walking one way, and I said, "Hi, Coach," and he snapped at me and said, "Don't call me Coach."
Really?
Yeah.
You never told me that.
Yeah. I walked right by Banker, and he snapped at me. His face got red, and I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I text Sean. I'm like, "I don't know what's up with Banker, but he just said not to call him Coach, so I'm kind of confused."
Did that get released?
I don't know. That was not released.
I thought that was released sort of right away, wasn't it?
It was 48 hours after it happened, I believe.
Really?
It may have gone on a local thing, but it wasn't like a blown up full scale proportion.
We got the email.
It was.
That
You know what?
Wednesday
No,
night,
I lied. It wasn't the day after. It was that afternoon because it was at 12:30 when I ran to him. I think it was on the way to the show. I think it was. And then it got
iconic.
And then it got released at about 3:30. It was right after the show ended or something like that.
It got released when we were.
Was it during the show?
It was during the event.
What event was
it? During the Outland Trophy.
That's right. Okay, it was
on a Wednesday evening.
Yep, it was that day though, because I remember that whole thing, and it was just the most weird thing that I think maybe has happened to me. But yeah, so
very strange circumstances surrounding the Mike Riley era here at Nebraska.
I've met 2 defensive coordinators the past 2 years. They both got fired.
Yeah, there you go. David's the curse, but it might not be with Coach Frost and Coach Chenander. What did you see from Nebraska this spring, Scott, that maybe helped you look toward the future and say maybe this is the change they need?
I mean, you have to be extremely impressed with the workouts they've been able to put in, and the fact that you hear stories that the entire team was puking after the first or second day of these morning practices and morning workouts. I think it really shows you how much work Frost and this group of coaches is really emphasizing to make sure these guys are in shape, that they're able to go the course of a season, but not only that they continue to improve. I know there's guys who are saying that they're losing weight and gaining muscle, they're gaining speed, and that's important, especially for a Scott Frost offense that relies heavily on a whole lot of speed and is very, very efficient. And that's just one step in the right direction, in my opinion.
You know, I always hate overreading spring because everyone's improved. Every offense works. The defense is fantastic. Everyone's in shape. Everyone's excited.
One guy who hasn't excelled.
Everyone's
in the last 2
under
years
the radar and has worked toward it.
Ready to break through.
I mean, it's one of those things where I got to see live game. And I think the offense is going to be such a test in the Big Ten. I'm really excited to see what it does. I think the defense in Chenander needs to prove he can play defense. His defense can play defense because they had a couple good players on UCF, but that team as a collective unit was bad. It was. I thought
yards per play was good.
I thought
yards per play was really
in
good.
terms of points allowed though.
Yeah, in terms of points allowed, but
you can't get in a shootout in the Big Ten. Like it's just not realistic.
Yeah, Ohio State has the past couple of years with Penn State, but I mean that's how you win football games.
Consistent week by week by week.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm not doubting Shenander's schemes. I'm doubting any of that. But I'm just saying he needs to prove that he can stop teams from scoring back to back to back possessions because that's what it takes in the Big Ten. Tough, hard-nosed, gritty players. That's what wins.
Yeah.
That's what wins.
No, for sure. I mean, as long as they can force turnovers, I think it's going to be a different story. But that's been the issue the past however many years with Nebraska football is they don't force turnovers.
And I'm still taking the crap for the person that broke the news that Nebraska corners had 0 picks last season because I texted Sean Callahan that. And then he tweeted, didn't let me tweet it, and then everyone went based off that. But I'm just salty. But I think the corners just have to improve. And cornerbacks right now, I think, is one of the big question marks going into this season. Losing. I mean, Chris Jones barely played. Kalu's gone. You got a couple guys that could step up, but I mean, corners could be a legitimate concern, I think, for this defense. So we'll see. There's just a lot of storylines. I think the quarterback battle is still something to watch. I'm still not sold that Adrian Martinez is the guy because I'm not going to overreact to a spring game. I want to see him at 100%, and I also think Jebbia showed some real talent there, but I don't know if he has the quickness to be able to run the offense.
Well, speaking of Adrian Martinez, we played basketball with him at the Rec the other day, and we've had a lot of good conversations about the Rec Center on this show, haven't we, Scott?
Oh, we have, Matt Reynoldson. We have.
We'll recap some of those conversations and tell you, reminisce on our biggest broken story here on the Spill Sports Show. All that coming up next right here on the final edition of the Spill Sports Show. Stay with us.
Bike ride, go fish, walk in the park, phone call, milkshake, play catch, picnic, fly a kite, tell jokes, laugh, talk, read a story, tell a story, bumper cars, swing set, bowling, pillow fight, cut loose, stay tight. Whew. Because the smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today. Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Hey, what's up? Holla at ya, boy. XOXOXO. You getting these texts? Question mark. Where are you? What are you doing? OMG, you are making me mad. You better text me back. I'm waiting outside your house.
Relentless, aggressive texting is like sending an angry robot to deliver your message. When does the robot become dangerous? Let us know at that'snotcool.com.
That'snotcool.com.
Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Imagine never being able to drive, to watch TV, or even read Harry Potter.
Reading is essential to our lives. City Impact Reading Center helps Lincoln Public Elementary Schools boost their students' reading scores by getting all students at or above their grade's reading level. Each week, volunteers of all ages go sit and read with students. You can help a student gain an important life skill and help change their future. If you're looking for some rewarding volunteer experiences, please visit their website at cityimpact.org.
Today in school, I learned a lot. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me. In biology, I learned that I'm fat and stupid. In English, I learned that I'm disgusting. And in gym, I learned that I'm pathetic and a joke. The only thing I didn't learn in school today is why no one ever helps.
Kids witness bullying every day. They want to help, but they don't know how. Teach them how to stop bullying and be more than a bystander at stopbullying.gov. A message from the Ad Council.
Check out my new time machine.
Does it work?
Hit the button.
Hey, it's Napoleon.
Oui. Check out the future.
Hey, you have a nice house. Why don't I?
You didn't save any money, buddy.
If only there was a way I could go back in time and fix that.
Yeah.
Save something for the future. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free ways to save, go to feedthepig.org. That's feedthepig.org.
This message brought to you by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants and the Ad Council.
Hey, I'm an exchange student, and you can be one too. Don't just sit around and wish you could travel the world. Go do it. You'll see incredible things, make lifelong friends, and change your life in more ways than you can imagine. And hey, scholarships are available, and you may not even have to pay much more than you do now. The helpful team in the Study Abroad office are awaiting your call. So what are you waiting for? Call them now at 402-472-5358. That's 402-472-5358.
The Spill Sports Show with Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers. Never miss a show again. Check out our podcast at thespillkrnu.wordpress.com.
The 76ers could have drastically improved their organization by drafting Walter Pitchford.
Quite frankly, if he wins a Super Bowl, I'll direct it 30 for 30 on it.
I've watched this kid play multiple times on national television.
You like watching kids, David?
Dude, I love basketball. Excuse me.
The Spill Sports Show. Thursday drive time from 3 to 5 on KRNU.
Always been a John Deere guy.
Welcome back to the Spill Sports Show. That's Bill Moose, always talking about being a John Deere guy. Bill Moose, the new athletic director of the University of Nebraska, and he oversaw Tim Miles' best basketball season as the Husker head coach. But we went through some really high Nebraska ball ups and downs both this year and in years past. Nebraska finishing 22-11 this year, their most wins since 1991. And their most conference wins ever. So what happened at the end of the season in Nebraska ball, David?
Boys. I hate to be that guy, but just what I thought would happen. And it wasn't their fault necessarily. The scheduling was bad, but in reality, they had 3 or 4 different games where if the ball goes one way or they make one more play, they're probably in the tournament. And I think when it happened that they didn't even get home court, I just think they felt so shunned and so ticked off. But instead of actually using that as motivation to prove everybody wrong, they just folded up like a cheap tent.
Yeah, and I think, too, I don't reflect much on that NIT game. I don't think that reflects on this Husker basketball team. I think the fact that the NIT committee gave them a 5 seed was completely disrespectful. I don't think that Nebraska was a tournament team. Like you said, I don't know if they had enough on their resume to make it in.
That was the point. Everyone will agree.
Yeah.
They were one of the top 68 teams in the country.
Right.
I believe that. But the fact is you need to still cater that toward what the committee looks for. And it's not Miles' fault again. Big Ten scheduling sucks.
But what I'm saying too is that this team deserved to be deserved to have home court advantage in the NIT. And so when a team realized they're 5 seed in the NIT, now they do have something to play for, but how much motivation was truly there? I think it showed kind of a lackadaisical performance against Mississippi State.
Was a miracle corner 3 away from beating 2 Final Four teams. So a very good year, and kind of what Bill Moose said, he wants his teams to be competitive. Nebraska certainly was down the stretch, except for that awful shooting game in Madison Square Garden against Michigan. I mean, Nebraska had a really good year, didn't really get blown out since the beginning of December, and their one blowout this year was at the hands of Michigan State, and that was on Scott Frost Day, so nobody really cared.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Good timing for football things, and that brings us kind of back to some of the ups and downs of the Tim Miles era. And one of the big things, I guess, thinking this year, Nebraska almost had a center transfer in Jordy Shamanga, and that was really a tumultuous situation for quite a while.
It was just weird. Again, it goes back to one of those weird things. Like, who's ever heard of a starting center? I mean, mostly starting. I don't think he was starting. He was starting mostly every game up until Miles and company figured out, oh, wait, Roby can play the 5, and we're actually a lot better. But, Shamanga getting good minutes off the bench and a starting power 6 in basketball terms anyway. Power 6 center wants to transfer. Like, I just don't know where he thought he was going to be able to go.
Hey, you're that tall, you can go anywhere.
I mean, I don't know about that. I don't think a lot of teams would have taken him.
Tall guys.
But, it was just a weird situation. I think Jordy did what was best for him because he's an older guy. Like, if he transferred, he would have been 22, I believe, and still have 2 years of eligibility. Like, it just...
Oh, yeah, I forgot he started college late.
It just didn't make much sense to me if you wanted to transfer. But I think Miles and company handled that very respectfully. I think Shamanga handled it respectfully enough, gave him meetings. He just didn't walk out and leave. He talked to him a couple times before deciding, hey, I'm going to go back. But granted, to be fair, Jordy, he did get some bad advice from some people close to him. But, again, it goes back to just the whole paradigm of Nebraska athletics just being one weird freaking place. It goes to baseball, it goes to basketball, it goes to football.
2 national championships in volleyball since we've been on the air.
Yeah, which is great. Yeah. And, I mean, that's just how this Nebraska program has been. They lost a starting power forward in Ed Morrow the year before. I mean, they gained some transfers, but they also lose people to transfers as well. And now it's, once again, not necessarily transfers, but Copeland and Palmer could be gone for the draft. I believe that at least James Palmer Jr. I don't know.
I've thought about it. I think James Palmer will come back. I still don't know why he would to an extent, but Copeland, I feel, is in Tyler.
I think he's too old.
Copeland is in Tyler Cook's camp because I'm friends with Tyler Cook. They're both not draft ready, okay? But the fact is, due to extenuating circumstances, they're going to go. Copeland is going to be 24 next year with a bad back. I mean, he's just not polished enough to be an NBA guy, but, he can go overseas and make some money, and he may as well do that in his prime. Let the guy go chase his money. There's just really not much reason for him to come back because nobody's going to draft almost a 25-year-old with a bad back in basketball. Can we all agree on that? Like, no matter how good you are, they're not going to do it. So I think Copeland will be gone. I think Palmer will come back, and Roby, obviously, is going to come back, and I think Roby could be a first-rounder next year if he really proves himself and proves the jump shot.
Roby has a high second-round grade right now as far as the early 2019 mock drafts.
Look at his measurables. It's just what NBA scouts drool over. Exactly. It's just exactly what they look for.
Exactly. But, back to Nebraska's center woes. They've had a few of them and actually had one notable transfer that we broke on this show. Our only piece of breaking news ever on this show was the transfer of former center Jake Hammond, who ended up
that was a fun
at Central Oklahoma. We fought for our sources that time. And, ended up paying a little bit of the price via some shouting matches, but it was we learned that Jake Hammond was indeed going to transfer, and a tough career for him here, but it's been a roller coaster of Nebraska basketball throughout our time on this show, and we've appreciated you all taking it in stride with us because it's been a really interesting time.
Yeah, it really has. Again, it goes back to just, I think, how weird sports is, how great sports is. But, I don't know how Jake Hammond's doing right now, but, he I hate to say it, he was kind of a laughingstock for Nebraska basketball at the time because I think, Scott, you and I were sitting here just like, how is this kid getting 9 minutes a game? He'd go in. I think he had more. I'm serious. I don't know this for a fact. This is total speculation. I think he had more fouls than points in his career. Like, I'm about to look that up. But that was just a weird situation. But I think everyone that watched it just knew that Jake Hammond was meant for something else. And this is a guy that had multiple D1 offers. He was a top 150 kid at one time, Matt? Wasn't he?
Yep.
Yeah, top 150 kid. And I don't know if something happened in his life or he just stopped, like, the work ethic just kind of died down and the passion maybe died down. But he's just one of those sad cases. That kid had so much talent and so much potential, but just never could really make it work.
Yeah, and now he's thriving at Central Oklahoma, though. Had 12 rebounds and 19 points against Washburn. Those are 2 season highs for him. But I think that just is a testament. And it also look at how Tim Miles develops players. I think that's an important factor as well. I think some players really do like playing for Miles and what he's able to provide for them. But just based on his offensive ideology, I think there's certain players that really don't fit in well with Tim Miles'
No,
team.
absolutely not.
And I Jake Hammond aside, but even guys, bigger names like Ed Morrow, who transferred, Jordy Shimanga thinking of transferring, and some of these older guys who might stay in the draft because they don't want to deal with this Tim Miles offense.
I also think, though, that it's a coaching problem in terms of the roster construction was really bad. I don't think Miles has ever recruited the right type of players for what he wants to run. Yeah. I think there's not enough big guys. I don't think he has a true point, and I think a true point is what's missing with this team because, I mean, I've been all over Glenn Watson for the past 2 years. He's not. And, neither is Thomas Allen. I hate to say it, Xavier Johnson would have been a perfect point guard, I think. He's a very quick guy who can penetrate and kick out. I think he would have been a really, really nice addition. But I think the roster construction's been bad. But I think another thing to keep in mind, Scott and Matt, is the fact that Miles barely ever recruits guys who stay. They transfer, and then he brings in transfers. That's just not how you run a steady, capable program, in my opinion, at least. You can't depend on transfers. I mean, you can look at Iowa State. I think that's best case. They still don't make it far in the postseason.
Well, and that's the thing, too. When you recruit, though, you don't ask, "Are you going to transfer?" That's not a huge topic.
No, yeah.
I think it's based on the coaching. I think because you can't say it's the atmosphere that makes kids want to transfer. It's not that, and it's not the amount of coverage they get. I think you have to look at coaching.
Yep.
And Tim Miles has done a good job with transfers coming in. And some of the best players on this team were all transfers. They were all transfers.
What I'm curious about, though, too, is what's the recruiting pitch like? Because is it a problem of they get a certain recruiting pitch, then the second they sign that dotted line, things just change up, and they don't find that it's a good fit? Like, I mean, I'm not accusing Miles of anything or anything like that at all. I'm just simply wondering how come so many kids that signed in Nebraska transfer, and how come Nebraska has to depend on transfers? Because I really don't know.
Say that again?
Why do so many kids that come to Nebraska transfer out, and why do they depend on transfers? Is it because of a bad recruiting pitch, and then the second they sign the dotted line, it changes? Or is it just they find out it isn't a good fit? Like there's just a lot of things that I'm not sure about. But there has to be some sort of correlation between players signing and going.
Yeah, and I mean, this isn't just a thing for Nebraska. There are a lot of programs where guys are. It's two or three guys who transfer from the program, but
you average 2 a year from each team. It's like 740, something like that.
But Nebraska, it seems, bigger names can transfer from the program, and that's when it can be a problem when you have guys in your starting lineup who are transferring away. But I don't know. It's interesting to see, and Roby, I think he's here to stay. Glenn Watson here to stay, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah. I know Glenn was thinking about it, too, when all his friends were transferring.
And it says a lot with him saying, but I think what's interesting is the future of this program because we talk about true point guards. Glenn Watson, and I don't know if it's the offense or his mindset, but there were times in games where you knew it was a close game. Glenn Watson had the ball. It did not matter if there were 3 people open in that court. Glenn Watson was taking a deep contested shot.
And that's why I continually used to bag on him on the show, is because I couldn't believe some of his shot selections, and that's why I was frustrated about. It just didn't make sense. Palmer could have 22 points. He could have 16 of the last 18 or whatever, and then Glenn would still take a contested 3 with like 8 seconds on the shot clock.
Yeah.
just didn't know why.
Yeah. Well, Nebraska's had certainly plenty of drama over the past few years, and we've been along for the ride for a lot of it. But one person never short of drama until he stopped tweeting on his Twitter account was probably the impetus for this show in himself, Jordan Stevenson.
Hello, Twitter bird.
Former Nebraska running back Jordan Stevenson tends to say some interesting, inspirational things.
It's just all about going in there with a great mindset and just knowing the plan, sticking to the plan. That's my favorite motto, sticking to the plan. Man, the sky's the limit. Anything's possible.
His quotes are words to live by, and his Twitter game is just as strong.
Tell me something now.
Without further ado, here's the Jordan Stevenson Tweet of the Week.
No, good times. Still one of the best things ever.
The best segment we've ever done on this show is the Jordan Stevenson Tweet of the Week, and probably saving the best for last. We've really enjoyed poking fun at former Nebraska running back Jordan Stevenson over the years. He was a running back that was in on kickoff returns for Mike Riley. It was a late addition to Mike Riley's 2016 class, and returned kickoffs for an average of, 12 and a half yards?
12 and a half yards, yeah. That's why his mixtapes could be titled 12.5.
12 and a half yards, and then thought he was a rapper. It ended up transferring to Navarro College.
I don't even think he played.
A very, very big jump in the life of Jordan Stevenson. We don't.
He also blocked Matt on Twitter.
Blocked me on Twitter, yes, indeed. We don't know where he is now, but we do know his greatest tweet of all time, at least by our estimation. Quote, "People won't reel but get mad when real see why they not real." Sleeping emoji.
Yeah. Oh, I love this.
That was my
I
favorite tweet of Jordan Stevenson's career.
And actually, Scott, our own Scott Ayers, has a PhD in emoji breakdown.
Yes, PhD in emoji breakdown. So what does the sleeping emoji mean in this tweet, Scott?
Yeah, so I think what we hear is he's tucking us into bed, and it's just a nice little lullaby, and he's saying, "Night, night, sleep tight, baby." And that's what Jordan Stevenson did. He tucked the defenders into bed, taking it to the house. That's what Jordan Stevenson did, and that's what that emoji means.
Jordan Stevenson was just we called him the hood philosopher because he was from an upscale part of Dallas.
Hoodonomics.
But really thought he was from
Thugonomics.
Just this really tough part of Dallas, I think.
Yeah.
And was really very vocal about his grind and his struggle. And we don't pretend to know a lot about Jordan Stevenson's life, but he was a high 4-star running back, Rivals 250 running back.
He was like I think he was 140. Yeah, 140s.
Didn't get into Wisconsin because of academics.
Which, to be fair, Wisconsin's a very, very good academic school.
Right,
I'm just,
right.
All right.
It came to Nebraska.
I'll be fair.
After a weak recruiting process, and came into Nebraska, frankly, not in shape.
Didn't he put out a transfer list about where he's going to transfer from Nebraska and include like Alabama, Texas, and all this stuff? And then
LSU,
none of them called.
None of them called. No. And Jordan Stevenson was always interesting for us to follow, both during and after his time. He had the famed twos up, and just an icon in this show's history.
You know, here's what I imagine. I know people are going to get salty about this, but he's like a failed version of Buki that actually came to Nebraska in terms of like the amount of attention that he got for just doing absolutely nothing.
Yep, absolutely. Scott, final thoughts on Jordan Stevenson?
I had to say I will miss this segment more than any other segment that we'll ever do in radio. And I want to say thank you, Jordan, from the bottom of all three of our hearts. You changed.
You're the real one.
You changed radio.
Hey, Jordan. We aren't sleeping on the real one that is you.
One last time, Jordan Stevenson.
It's just all about going in there with a great mindset and just knowing the plan, sticking to the plan. That's my favorite motto, sticking to the plan. Man, the sky's the limit. Anything's possible.
You're listening to the Spill Sports Show.